The worst part about rude people isn't just what they say to me. It's how long it stays in my head after it's over. Someone makes a rude comment, maybe a sharp remark at work, a backhanded compliment from someone in my family, or a stranger online who decides I'm wrong and calls me an idiot for thinking the way I do. And my first instinct? I want to hit back. I want to come up with the exact sentence that shuts them down and puts them in their place. But then the moment slips away, and I either say too much, say nothing at all, or spend the next few hours replaying it in my head, wishing I had handled it differently. Most people think the answer to rudeness is having a better comeback. Find the right words, say them with confidence, win the moment. That's what movies show us. That's what the internet trains us to do. Hit back harder, be sharper, be faster. Don't let anyone walk all over me. But here's the thing. Psychology tells a very different story. The people who actually handle rude behavior the best, they're not the ones with the quickest comebacks. They're the ones who understand what's really going on underneath these interactions. And once I understand that, I stop reacting and I start responding in a way that actually works. If I've ever walked away from a rude moment feeling drained, embarrassed, or like I somehow lost even though I didn't do anything wrong, this is for me. Because the problem usually isn't what I said. It's that nobody ever taught me the psychology behind why rude people act the way they do, or what to do when it happens. So today, I'm breaking down 5 smart, psychology-based ways to shut down rude people without arguing, without losing my composure, and without lowering myself to their level. The first one feels the most unnatural, and it's called the gray rock method. The idea is simple. I become as boring and unremarkable as a gray rock. When someone is rude to me, especially the kind of person who feeds off reactions, my emotional response becomes the reward. My frustration, my defensiveness, the small signs on my face that show they got under my skin. That's exactly what they're looking for. Psychologists who study difficult personalities point out that some people are drawn to emotional reactions the same way others look for validation. My reaction confirms their sense of control in the moment. So when I go flat, calm, neutral, and unreadable, I cut off that supply. No visible emotion, no escalation, nothing interesting for them to work with. I don't ignore them and I don't argue. I just give them nothing they can use. Short answers, neutral tone. Then I move on. It's not weakness, it's strategy, it's control. But that's only part of the picture, because not all rude behavior comes from a need for control. Sometimes it comes from something deeper, pain. And this is where it starts to get interesting. A lot of people who act rude all the time are operating from something psychologists call emotional dysregulation. They don't really have the internal tools to handle frustration, embarrassment, or insecurity, so it spills out. And it usually comes out as snark, dismissiveness, or straight-up cruelty. And understanding that doesn't mean I excuse it. It just means I stop taking it personally. Because here's the reality. What they say almost never has as much to do with me as it feels like it does. Most of the time, it's about something they're carrying, and I just happen to be in the way. And that leads right into the second method, the calm, clarifying question. When someone says something rude, most people either shut down or react emotionally. But there's a third option. I ask a simple, steady question. Something like, "What did you mean by that?" Or, "Can you explain what you meant?" Not in an aggressive way, not with sarcasm, just calm, just direct. What this does, psychologically, is make the other person hear their own words again, but this time through my request for clarity. A lot of rude comments depend on speed. They're said quickly and taken in just as fast. But when I slow things down and ask them to explain, one of 3 things happens. They either backtrack, realize how they sounded, or show even more of who they really are. Either way, I come out ahead without arguing. Think about it. I'm not accusing them of anything. I'm not raising my voice. I'm simply asking them to clarify. And for most people who say rude things without thinking, that pause alone is enough to take the energy out of the situation. The third method is what social psychologists sometimes call the unexpected agreement trap. When someone is rude or critical, they're expecting resistance. They're ready for me to push back, and that's what keeps the tension going. So instead, I agree with whatever part is actually true, and I leave it there. If someone says, "You're always so quiet," I say, "Yeah, I can be pretty quiet sometimes." And then I stop. No defending myself. No explaining. No overthinking or trying to justify anything. That kind of response gives them nothing to argue with. The conversation just runs out of energy. There's a reason conflict feeds on opposition. When I take that away, the whole dynamic falls apart. The fourth method goes a level deeper. American culture is obsessed with clapping back. Social media has turned every rude comment into a performance. It becomes about who's the sharpest, who gets the most attention for shutting someone down. And there's real pressure, especially online, to always have a response that makes me look calm, clever, and unaffected. But this is where it starts to get interesting. Research on social power keeps showing the same pattern. The person who needs the last word is usually the one who feels the most insecure. Real confidence doesn't need an audience. And sometimes, the strongest thing I can do is choose not to engage at all. Not because I'm scared, but because I've already decided the interaction isn't worth my energy. In a culture that treats silence like weakness, walking away or saying nothing is actually one of the most psychologically advanced moves I can make. Picture this. I'm at a family gathering, and someone makes a sharp comment about my choices, my career, my relationship, or my weight. People around me glance over, waiting to see how I'll react. And I just pause, take a breath, give a small smile, and shift the conversation. No anger, no visible reaction, just calm, steady composure. That moment, that restraint, leaves a stronger impression than any comeback ever could. But sometimes none of these methods work because the behavior isn't occasional, it's a pattern. And that brings me to the fifth method, which matters the most, setting a quiet, firm boundary. Not a speech, not a confrontation, just one clear sentence. I'm not going to continue this conversation if it stays like this. And then I follow through. Psychologists describe this as an assertive response rooted in self-respect, not anger. I'm not attacking the other person. I'm defining what I will and won't accept. People who are consistently rude often keep pushing because they've never really hit a limit. When I set one calmly and hold it, everything starts to shift. So the real question is, which of these feels hardest for me? Is it staying calm in the moment or setting the boundary afterward? Because here's what's true about people who struggle most with rude behavior. They're often deeply empathetic. They feel things strongly. They care about fairness and they avoid conflict because they genuinely value connection. Psychologists sometimes call this a high agreeableness profile. And while that's a real strength in the right relationships, it can also make me a target for people who mistake kindness for weakness. I'm not too sensitive. I'm not bad at confrontation. I just need a different set of tools. So which of these 5 methods do I think I'd actually use? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious whether most people lean toward the gray rock method or the clarifying question. If this kind of psychology resonates with me, the real practical side of how people actually behave, go ahead and subscribe. There's a lot more like this coming. And in the next video, I'm going to break down a specific type of person who looks completely confident on the outside, but is driven by one of the most quietly destructive fears in psychology. I probably know someone like this. I might even be one of them.